So we're here at Redmond on the Microsoft campus for Microsoft MVP Summit. So we're both MVPs in the Foundry space. But what's the catch?
Wow. Kind of like Fight Club, you can't talk about it right away because of the NDA in place.
Everything is under NDA, but what has happened this year in 2026 is already quite a lot to talk about. Agentic security has gone wild. We've seen commoditization of models. We've seen legislation. So we're going to talk governance, legislation, commoditization, and then what's on the future. So I guess, where do you want to start?
I guess let's go with the kind of regulatory and like legal side of this, because that's kind of the compelling driver for a lot of organizations. Ultimately, they're going to follow what the law tells them to.
Plus, I guess, a cheat that I don't think we've mentioned so far. We were both once lawyers, so we're really comfortable starting with law.
It's a good start point for us, definitely.
So there's been a lot of change. I think the one that interested me the most was what Singapore did with the launch in January, I think it was, of their agentic governance framework. What did you think about that? Were you following that?
I was a little bit. There's a lot out there, to be honest. So I kind of did do a bit of a deep dive into it, kind of a bit after the fact, I guess. Now, Singapore, I think one of the key things for them is around what does all this mean for their people? And, you know, looking at how the legislation, Singapore is quite an interesting one. So instead of just seeing AI as LLMs, it does look at things with that agentic application lens. So looking at kind of actual agents that go out and do things for people.
So I guess with the new OWASP definitions around agentic security, there's all these new domains of AI which are important, which we wrote that blog post around. For example, you might have rogue agents that don't do what you expect. You might have agents that are communicating with other agents who could potentially change their instructions, poison them, misaligned agents. And you've got cascading failures. When you're building upon a molehill of all these agents, what happens when the failures kick in? So I guess it's good that Singapore is thinking about this. What are you seeing in the rest of the world?
It's an interesting one because you might not see the same kind of approach being taken by other countries, which are probably participating in different ways to, you know, the AI landscape, let's call it. So when I think of the UK, one of the key things I'm seeing is the kind of de-scoping effectively. That was the once called AI Safety Institute, and now is the AI Security Institute. You know, from my standpoint, great that we've got an AI Security Institute. That's really cool. But what they did was they took the Safety Institute and removed some of the things about biases and kind of the aspects that you'd call more safety categories.
And that seems to be a focus in most places, because I know Australia has put in a ton of investment in cybersecurity. Microsoft launched their cybersecurity skilling piece last year. So you've got the UK focusing on the Safety Institute. The EU has just pushed back enforcement of the EU AI Act for high-risk harms, at least, and changed the SME exemption to companies with over 750 employees, which isn't what they'd usually treat as an SME. So you've got the UK descoping, the EU pushing back, you've got Australia focusing on security. And then in the US, whilst NIST might be looking at their RFI all up on agentic security, the government seems to be focusing on deregulation and how can we innovate further. So it seems to me like everyone is trying to run faster, might be seeing governance as a barrier to adoption. I mean, I don't agree, but I think that's the way I'm seeing countries react.
That's an interesting thought, actually. I guess if we take it back to what we were looking at before, one of the things was how nations are looking at AI and what they see their role in it. You know, for better or for worse, I think nations like the United States and the UK are looking at, you know, the perception of an AI race, you know, a race to AGI maybe as a milestone, or kind of some form of super intelligence, whatever your definition may be of that. Maybe even looking at how AI research can be AI-ified so that it doesn't need people to do it anymore, as kind of another critical milestone point. So I guess if you're looking at it from that lens, you start to see how certain things will be de-scoped in the kind of safety aspect potentially, or a certain level of risk acceptance, a higher risk appetite, with the priority on innovation. I guess is what it comes down to.
I guess AI is always a bit of a moving feast. So 2 years ago, AI probably meant generative AI.
Yeah.
It meant large language models. 10 years ago, it was machine learning. 30 years ago, it's expert systems. But I think that's why I liked OWASP and touched on it earlier. I felt like OWASP was the first agentic security piece that really focused on agents and not the large language models underneath. Do you think we're starting to see commodification in this space? Because it seems like we're no longer seeing the model as a primary building block, but the architecture around the model.
It's an interesting one. So yeah, I think in some ways I could see commodification to this, at least compared to where it was 2 years ago, let's say, because of course, everyone's talking about agents, have been for at least a year now. I'm in the mainstream. I guess when I look at things like models, I do use things like, from an evaluation standpoint, look at how performance is or security is across different model use. But really, I'm just kind of picking one from the catalog, or I'm kind of looking at using the model router and just taking it all out of the equation. I don't want to be thinking about it so much. And so if I was to kind of look at that, I'd be saying, yeah, I guess I am seeing it more as a commodity. I don't care as much as I used to about, what percentile it's in for a math problem, for example, unless I'm doing something really math intensive. I can tell them in the US actually, because I said math instead of maths.
Yeah, I guess OpenClaw is a good example of that. So OpenClaw, my feelings on OpenClaw.
Oh yeah.
I think it's solving a need. Many people have built their own thing with tools from NAN to custom workflows. So I respect the idea, even if I think the implementation could have been more secure. In fairness, it was never claimed to be secure. But I think that's a really good example of commodification, because OpenClaw works with any model under the hood to achieve tasks for you. And we're seeing the enterprise take the same approach. I mean, we had Claude Cowork, and when that was announced, a ton of companies' share prices dropped. Now, Microsoft is about to launch Copilot Cowork in their Wave 3 of M365. It's the Anthropic tech wrapped up. So I guess people might see Microsoft and OpenAI as synonymous, but really, Microsoft is the platform for all AI. So again, commodification?
I'd argue, yeah, you've made a good point there. Hadn't really considered it from the co-work lens, but yes, it is very much a Anthropic wraparound, isn't it, for this? And you actually kind of brought me onto something else. As you were saying that, I was thinking of, there's something you said in the car actually yesterday around OpenClaw. I'm not a user of it, but you were kind of saying about how it was something that somebody hadn't really put together and open sourced it. But you're probably doing some of this to solve your own problems and looking at it from a bespoke, like I was going to say composable, but a disposable kind of application.
And I think I'm seeing commodification at every level of the stack. So you'll have heard me talk a few times about how I think SaaS might be eventually dead. It's gonna have a long death. And Satya has said the same. Have people talking about the SaaS apocalypse, and the data layer is the way forward for me. I think data is what's important. Today, when you use a CRM system, the business rules live in the CRM. They need to migrate to the data layer so that agents can interact with systems as a first-class citizen. To my mind, commodification affects the model, affects the apps that we use, and it means that what I care about is that if you log a sale, that your agent or you log it in the same way. I don't care if you're using the app interface. And again, I didn't open source it because it's very bespoke to me. And I think our agents are very private. But then I guess that's another example of commodification, right? Skills.
Yeah.
For example, the skills protocol's been donated, LLMs.txt is being adopted. There's a lot of commodification in the protocol layer. So again, last year, there was ACP, MCP, A2A, A2P, like all these three TLAs. ACP is merged with A2A. We've got one standard now for agents speaking to agents. MCP is the de facto standard for agents speaking to tools. Do you think open source is driving this commodification? Why do you think that's happening?
It's an interesting question. Is it itself driving the commodification? Perhaps so, in the sense, again, if I link it back to OpenClaw, what you saw there was how someone did something that people thought was great and they gave it GitHub stars, which is apparently a form of currency these days. But it kind of drove that kind of mass adoption with people who, talking to Kevin McDonald recently and talked about a skills gap being addressed with skills in the AI context. I think having that mass adoption by, I'm not going to say citizen developers, I don't think that's quite the correct term, but by perhaps newer developers or people coming to become developers or wanting to perfect that, own that skill a bit more, probably does drive commodification. And I think the open source community, through the standards as well, is definitely doing that, because one thing that you mentioned there was around A2A. And I was looking at how A2A is the standard recently, because we did a blog on AI gateways recently, right? And to look at the AI gateway, to bring in an agent into that gateway, you use the A2A protocol. And if you want to bring in an API or MCP, you can kind of do it from the lens of open API. So I think these standards probably are kind of standardizing it, if you want to call it something other than commodification. But yeah, a bit of a question for you. What does the commodification mean to you?
So for me, commodification is a good thing in the sense that it drives down cost, token cost. That can also mean unexpected things. For example, if you're using Claude, and I'm a big Claude user, Opus has just been given access to a 1 million token context window. That doesn't mean you get many more tokens. You get the same amount, but now you can use a lot more and you can spend more. And I do worry, low stakes conspiracy theory about model providers incentivizing their models to use more tokens to drive up adoption. The commodification for me fundamentally means that we've got a lot more people having access to this technology. Don't think the open source community has been welcoming them with open arms. They see well-intentioned people doing pull requests with hundreds of thousands of lines of code, but they're not telling people, no, this is what good looks like. This is where security comes in. Some folks don't even know how Git works. And yes, that's a security concern, because people are having their databases dropped by agents in the wild and things like that. We talked about that before. But it's also on the open source community to tell people, okay, you're coming into this forum. Here are the rules and standards that we expect. And I think people are just going, oh, who are all these stupid people coming to open source? And it's a bit like, well, actually, you get probably gatekept because you had access to the skills. Maybe you need to tell people what the expectations are and what good looks like. And just saying, I don't like AI, that time's kind of gone, I'm afraid. So commodification to me means that the bar has been lowered to getting in. We now need to tell people what being a good citizen looks like. So OpenClaw is a good example. It's gone crazy in China. There's all kinds of adoptions like Rustclaw, people rolling their own, but these could be more secure. And then Claude has now launched Dispatch in their mobile apps. So you can tie Claude Cowork to your mobile. You can tie Claude Code to your mobile. So you can do stuff on your own machine. So there's the commodification. But also I think companies are trying to respond to commodification with lock-in. I mean, you're familiar with the Comet browser, right? Or agents in Edge, like Claude, for example. Have you tried any of these browsers, these agentic browsers?
Honestly, no, I haven't. Part of that is a security concern. So I am always aware of the risk of indirect prompt injection in particular with this, because ultimately you're letting an AI have at the internet. And, you remember Tay, right?
Tay.
Yeah, that was probably a good example of what kind of happens with indirect prompt injection.
Probably not the right place to talk about Tay.
No, it's been retired, and it was retired pretty quickly and for good reason.
Yeah, and I think the reason I mentioned Comet is linking back to commodification. Companies don't want to be commodified. They don't want to become the base of a pyramid that you have to secure. With this Perplexity browser, got Comet jacked in 150 seconds. So it's just over 2 minutes from a Reddit comment with an indirect prompt injection attack to Comet giving away credentials. Partner's CISO effectively said, ban all browsers in your enterprise, like agentic browsers. I don't think that's the way forward. But again, for me, it comes back to anytime you introduce these new technologies, we have to teach people how to use them responsibly. You can't hide that. That's a belief that I have, because otherwise people will use dark AI. They'll use Claude, ChatGPT, Mistral on their own phone. We should be telling our employees how these things work. So I guess that takes me from commodification to where these things are going. We've launched these technologies out into the wild. I'm seeing now almost we're trying to secure them after the fact, like kind of Pandora's box style. Does that match what you're seeing?
Absolutely. We were having conversations about agentic security before there was a larger, more widespread adoption of agentic applications. If we look at when we were talking about security and the conversation was very much around conversational bots, effectively, prompt and response type activities rather than something that is performing some sort of function using tools to do it. I'm finding that actually this is what keeps happening. It sounds like I'm criticizing it, but I think as a security professional working in the AI era, if we're going to call it that, I do have to.
Don't call it.
Fair enough. Given what I do, I have a level of acceptance that this is the way it's going to be. If we take the term like frontier, kind of widespread use beyond Microsoft now, if you're kind of working at the frontier, securing the frontier, the organizations doing this are actually kind of trying to move fast, and there is an element of breaking things, and it kind of puts security on the face of it at the back foot. They're reacting.
You just reminded me of the South Park episode with this.
Well, yeah. Interestingly, in that episode, they did have a little watermark that says Sora on it, so you can tell it's AI generated.
Unless you crop it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many places we could take this. I really want to talk about voice, about ambient modalities. You got me thinking about kind of co-work again. One of the things that worries me about security is a lot of people's perception is, well, there'll be a human watching what it's doing. Because in ChatGPT, I write something and I get a response. But if you've sent a message to your co-pilot co-work and you're watching it, well, you're not delegating work, are you? You're supervising it. You have to be able to step away for anything to happen. Do you trust your AI to just do something sensible if you're not watching it? What if it's got your credit card details and your work email? Like, how do you feel about that? This is why I feel like we're still securing as we go.
And you're kind of raising the kind of key topic that kind of sits at both security and governance, really, which is observability. Can we see, it's not necessarily the human in the loop decision making of it, which is, of course, also there and kind of important, but it's being able to actually see it. I was thinking about this as you're saying it, like, even in prompt and response scenarios, if you scale that up to everyone using AI, that's not real observability if you can look at all these conversations, because what are you meant to do with that much data? Like, what person is able to process all this?
And if you've got agents speaking to agents, then that doesn't scale. The observability has to be between the agents to do the analysis of what they're all doing. And I think that's where I'm seeing more folks build in new tools. Again, open source. Meta's just got their Llama firewall, which I think is in the high 90s for identifying prompt injection techniques, identifying kind of potential breaking of the guardrails and misalignment. But you need to do that on everything. You need to observe what your agents are doing if they speak to each other. And that is in OWASP and that is new. I don't think people are thinking about it yet.
No, and it's an interesting thought, actually, because, as you talk about things like voice, what I'm starting to think of really is maybe the problem isn't just for security to try and be patching all this up, but if we look a bit bigger and go to everyone's responsibility and what developers can do maybe a bit more, is how do we prepare for a kind of agentic web, if you like?
Yes, I like that, because, and before we go on to the agentic web, one thing that makes me think of it is everyone's talking about voice as the new modality. Probably is. I actually care about the modality after that. I've been talking about ambient AI for a long time. Yeah, I actually don't want AI that I have to tell to do things. If I save a legal contract, I want an AI to go, oh, Chris has got a contract here. He's not reviewed it. He's not signed it. I will go in and redline it and mark it up. There are a lot of things that if I was working in an office and I was someone's admin assistant, I might do these tasks because they're sensible. When AI can do that, that's when I think, we can sit back, relax, move to a 3-day work week.
It's an interesting thought, again, because actually what you're suggesting there is the proactivity of AI, at least in that scenario.
In non-destructive scenarios. It's kind of like how when you're building an app, in the old days, we had create, read, update, delete. But actually, when we launch stuff to the public, it's never a true delete. It's a soft delete, so we can restore it. Yeah, I don't want AI just doing things, but I'm happy with it adding comments that I can ignore if I want to.
Yeah. I think the CRUD aspect of it is probably spot on, at least from a security standpoint, because it comes down to fundamental data security, really. Like who has the permissions and what identities can do that.
Yeah, identity is a nice one because I guess there's authorization and there's authentication. If you have a security pass, that's great. If that pass lets you into every door in the building, maybe not so great.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about here, which is MCP.
And it all ties back to your mention of the agentic web. So we had LLMs.txt. It's been out for a couple of years now. And that was about how do you post a text file to identify and curate the content that you think might be cool for LLMs to know about. Then last year, we had the launch of NL Web, which I was really excited for. Every website gets an MCP. That MCP server effectively means that every web can become a conversational input interface. So if I'm on GeoCities back in the day, I can speak to GeoCities and tell it what I want and have it build a website. Isn't great at the permissioning aspect today.
Yeah, no, completely true. So luckily on Foundry, at least, you can do authentication, and you've got a few different authentication methods for the tools. But what you're drawing attention to is that nowhere really are you able to currently govern the finer points of that MCP server. So, use this tool, never use this one, or you need elevated permissions in order to use this part of the tool. And maybe some users or use cases will only benefit from the context of the model context protocol rather than the API.
This is why the MCP isn't dead. I've not liked the hype around that recently, because MCP isn't just access to data. It's also access to the context, the reusable pieces. Yes, skills are good for some things. Skills can be malicious. A lot of these agent skills marketplaces were found 1 in 5 at one point had malicious code in them. I'd rather use an MCP that's been built for WhatsApp that I can then review and trust than download some random skills, but that's me. So we talked about a lot of problems. Before we wrap up and kind of summarize what's already happened in just 3 months of 2026, I think the takeaways are, what would you be doing if you wanted to secure your systems today?
I mean, for me, and you're probably going to laugh at this, but a key thing for me is looking at how you build an AI gateway. So in terms of Foundry and Azure APIM, API management, and for those not familiar, you can build an AI gateway. And this is really just a fancy term for a Azure APIM deployment that has AI features in it.
That's tech. Why should people care about it?
Well, because you can kind of wrap all these things together. So what do I mean by that? The models from a variety of different providers can be put together.
Continue commodification. Great.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to put a bit of Gemini in there, your Foundry catalog, all in one place.
What else?
Tools, MCP servers. So you can kind of bundle MCP servers in a variety of different ways. You can bundle an API that you have in APIM. You can take third-party ones, deploy them as an Azure function, maybe. I've done that recently to be satisfied with my own security.
What else?
Wow, what else can you do? You've got the whole governance piece and observability. So whether that's throttling with token limits, setting quotas, so like annual, weekly, whatever your poison.
What users and departments are doing, I guess.
Yeah, the observability. So plugging it in to kind of actually see the token stream and process
the token usage. And I guess my favorite, Redis semantic caching.
Oh yeah,
I love this. The fact that if you send kind of a message to a model and a semantically similar message is returned, well, next time someone asks that same question, just send the same response back. But again, you need to secure it by checking for PII and cleaning it up. Anything else that you would do to secure before we wrap up?
Well, I think it's just a tip, really. Don't confuse, like we talked about, don't confuse observability with visibility. Just because you can see all the things doesn't mean you can actually physically achieve that.
So you've just invented the opposite of security through obscurity.
Yes.
There is no security through full visibility.
Absolutely true. It's too much data.
So 2026, we're still in March right now. We're here in Seattle. Ton that we're hearing the Fight Club can't share. The law is changing. Every single region of the world is adopting vastly different laws. You need to track them. Models are being commodified. So we're looking at what the next layer of value is from the orchestration to the agents. The way we do security is different. It's not about the LLMs. It's about the way security interacts. In response to commodification, the hyperscaler and LLM providers are trying to move up the stack with things like Claude Dispatch, Cowork, Comet Browser, Agentic browsers. the web is being bolted on. We're continuously bolting things on and sending them to be more agent friendly. And there's a lot of tools now to help us drive down the cost. Anything else that we should be thinking about?
Well, I think the main thing is because protocols are merging and demerging all the time, and one's being more adopted than others. I don't believe that MCP is dead, like a lot of people are trying to tell me, especially when they say it's instead of a CLI, which just uses an MCP behind the scenes. I think it's about, as an organization, you've got to make some strategic choices with platforms and tools, but the frameworks, you kind of just need to take a step back and look at your drivers, your objectives. What are you trying to achieve with AI? Where are you on like the diffusion of innovations model maybe? And look at then what decisions you should make off the back of that, because the state of the art's going to change a lot.
Yeah, and if you just have a chatbot box in your site, I'm probably not going to use it. And like Spataro said, there's a new king of a hill every 60 minutes.
Exactly.
That's all going to change. Well, always good to talk. I'm sure we'll be in another studio somewhere, maybe not as nice as this one. So I guess I'll say thank you to the Microsoft DevRel and Creators team.